everyone, and welcome to the seminar series by IDP in Climate Studies, IIT Bombay. Today we have with us Dr. Ankit Pramanik. Dr. Ankit is a postdoctoral researcher at University Libre de Brussels, Belgium. He is working on subglacial hydrology modeling of Greenland ice sheet. His primary research focus is on improving understanding of subglacial hydrology controlled ice dynamics, which is a major source of uncertainty of sea level rise projections. Dr. Ankit has obtained his PhD in geosciences with specialization in glaciology from University of Oslo, Norway, where he worked on energy balance and hydrology of glaciers of Fjord Basin, Svalbard. Thereafter, he briefly worked on glaciers of Himalaya. Today, he will be delivering a talk on influence of Greenland ice sheet, subglacial hydrology on ice dynamics and biogeochemistry. So welcome, Dr. Ankit. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks all everyone for joining in, and thanks to Professor Shubhimal and Professor Raj for giving me this opportunity to let me show some of my work. And before I proceed, I must thank Shiba and Krutika. Sorry if I pronounce the name incorrect, for organizing it and for making this nice poster. And others also are, I think, involved. So thanks for taking time in doing all this. I appreciate it. So from the title of the talk, you can understand that I'm going to talk about the glacier and specifically the hydrology of glaciers. Why is it important, how we study it. So I am Ankit. I am a postdoctoral researcher at University Libre de Bruxelles in Belgium. And for this work, I actively work with Sander and Frank Patin of ULB and also with Moro Werder of ETH Zurich. So first, let's see where these glaciers are located. So this is a global glacier map where yellow regions mark the location of glacier, but it doesn't include two big ice sheets. So one is further below, the Antarctic ice sheet, and the one in north, the Greenland ice sheet. Now, and this is how they look like. So this is Antarctica, left is Antarctica, right is Greenland. Now this is not to scale because Antarctica is way bigger than Greenland. Now, Antarctica has potential to cause around 58 meters of sea level rise if all the ice melts. The Greenland for same is around 7 meters. And if we combine all the glaciers, mountain glaciers together, that can lead to around 43 centimeters of sea level rise. But although their sea level contribution varies in different degree, but they play various different important role in different societal and economical aspect. I'll not, of course, go into detail of that, but if we look at their mass loss pattern, they are steadily losing mass, and they are losing mass at a very, very rapid rate. And this is a big concern because this ultimately will lead to sea level rise. Now, before going further, let's understand some basics of glaciers, like how glaciers work. So glacier gain mass through precipitation, through accumulation of snow, and it lose mass as it interacts with the different energy fluxes in the atmosphere. So in summer, there are different energy fluxes are there, and that interacts with the glacier, and that leads to production of melt in the glacier surface. And then this melt water percolates through the snow, where some of this water refreezes, and then rest of the water leaves the glacier, where it goes either to the river and ultimately end up into the ocean, where it leads to sea level rise. So if you look at the glacier surface, and here are some images from the Greenland, you will see like glacier melt in the surface, and then surface meltwater travels through some streams and end up into a lake or either into a moulin. And this moulin is basically a hole in the surface, which basically connects the surface to the bed. So as the surface water enters into this moulin, they reaches bed, the subglacial environment, where this water travels subglacially through somewhat complex nature and before appearing into the glacier front underneath the glacier. And here is an glacier front image in the Himalaya, where I participated in field work. And and you see there are water coming underneath the glacier, and this is how basically water gets transported from the glacier to the outlet for almost all the glacier across the world. So this is a primary source of mass loss for the glaciers through surface melting in summer. But there is also another way the glacier lose mass, which is known as basically dynamic mass loss. And what is that? This is very dominant in Antarctica and Greenland. So here is a schematics. Left is Antarctica, right is Greenland. And if you look at the Antarctica or Greenland, you'll see they are surrounded by oceans. So majority of the glaciers in Antarctica and quite substantial amount of glaciers in Greenland end up directly into the ocean or into the fjord. Now this ocean has relatively warmer temperature. So as they enter into this ocean, these glaciers start to melt from the bottom as well. And because of that, and if this melting here is very high, then that leads to collapse of this ice, and that further leads to sea level rise. Now in Antarctica, there is not much surface melt yet, but there are basal meltwater produced. And for Greenland, there can be surface melt, and this meltwater, as I mentioned before, enters into through this mole and reaches the bed. And this can lead to fast flow of ice. And if this fast flow occurs, that can bring more and more ice to the ocean and to the lower elevation, and that can produce further melting. And this is quite a complex phenomena, especially the dynamic mass loss. So in short, basically glacier get mass through precipitation and it lose mass due to two reasons. One is surface melting and another is the dynamic mass loss. Now let's understand why the need for subglacial hydrology arise. What is the big picture behind? And for that, we need to look at the global sea level rise. So if we look at the global sea level rise time series, you see it has increased dramatically, and it is very consistent with the increase of the temperature rise. Now it has mainly the global sea level increased mainly due to two reasons. So as the temperature rise, the ocean expands, and that leads to sea level rise, which is known as the thermal expansion, which is shown in red here. And the other component is the added meltwater from the glacier that I showed, that I explained before, and which is shown in the blue color. If we look at the mean contribution, relative contribution from different component over the 1971-2018, you see around 50% was coming due to thermal expansion. But if we look at the recent mean, you see the relative contribution from thermal expansion has decreased, and which has taken over by the meltwater from glaciers and the ice sheet across the world. And this contribution is going to increase further as we move more toward the warming climate. Now as this happens, this has various impact. For example, if sudden pulse of fresh water from this glacier ice sheets is added to the ocean, that can impact the ocean currents and ultimately the global climate. But also the sea level rise can lead to coastal erosion, storm surges, migration, food scarcity, and there can be a varied social economical impact on the humankind actually and onto the world. So we need to, so if we want to mitigate some of them, we need to know how much sea level is going to rise in future, right? By future, you mean from tomorrow to, let's say, 2100 or beyond. So for that, ice sheet models are developed. So ice sheet models, what they do, they take into consideration all the physical processes that are occurring at the ice sheet scale in the glacier. And then they finally predict how much these ice sheets are going to melt in future and how much will that lead to sea level rise. And here are some of the ice sheet models, and here is the one that is developed at ULB that I sometimes use. And these ice sheet models take part into a intercomparison project, and then from there, basically they project how much sea level is going to rise by the end of the century, that means 2100, and different contribution, how much is going to be the different contribution from glaciers, from Antarctica, and also from the Greenland. So one thing you see that for all these cases, the meltwater contribution, the sea level rise contribution from all of them is going to increase exponentially kind of till the end of the century. But also there is quite a lot of uncertainty there in the Greenland and in Antarctica as well. And before I go into that, I would like to, I thought it is very pertinent to show this scenario for Mumbai actually. And you see for by 2100, the Mumbai will have around half a meter of sea level rise, even in a moderate warming scenario. And if we look at the contribution from glacier and Greenland, that is going to be more than 50% for this projected sea level rise. And you can look at this website to find this same scenario and many more information for different other cities. So coming back to the sea level rise projection, so we see that this Greenland and Antarctica projection has quite a large uncertainty, and this is not good for the mitigation or for the planning. Now, why is this large uncertainty? The main reason behind this large uncertainty is the dynamic mass loss, because we can quite accurately quantify how much warming is going to happen and how much is going to melt in the glacier in the surface. But when this meltwater travels to the underneath the blade, how they will impact the ice dynamics, how more and more how the flow in the ice or in the glacier will change over the changing climate. That is very quite difficult to quantify. Now this ice dynamics is very much controlled by the presence of water underneath the bed, or we can say that this ice dynamics is basically a function of subglacial hydrology. So, if we look at the present Greenland mass loss pattern, you see like this blue color, the light blue, which is a dynamic mass loss component, and the green is the surface mass loss component. They contributes almost equally to the present scenario, present sea level rise contribution. So basically, if you ask me the main reasons to study subglacial hydrology, it is because to better understand the ice dynamics, and subsequently better predict the dynamic mass loss and future sea level projection. So that is why basically the subglacial hydrology study actually started. But as we moved more toward the recent time, and there are more and more studies, like different field specialist researcher started to investigate different environment in the polar region, then there are more things revealed. So what is that? So it is in recent time it is observed that subglacial hydrology not only impact the ice dynamics, but it also impacts the biogeochemistry. So through these moulins, not only water, along with water, different kind of tracers such as oxygen, carbon dioxide can enter into the system, and then they impact the chemical weathering and also the microbial activity. And this can have huge influence on the when this weathered element are transported through the hydrology system to the glacier outlet. This and when they add to the ocean or to the fjord, that can have huge influence on the climate. For the microbial activity, methane can be one of the important things. Methane is a greenhouse gas, and if it is released at a huge pulse to the atmosphere, that can further cause warming. So in recent times, some measurements have been done in some of the Greenland outlet glaciers, where it is observed like an elevated level of methane and the carbon dioxide emission from this glacier outlet. And here I would like to take note of point one reaction is that if methane comes in contact with the oxygen, that produce carbon dioxide. Now, when these methane pulses were plotted with discharge, so here is this black is the methane pulse, orange is discharge. You see that there is, as the discharge increases, the methane pulse also increases. But this pattern is not very linear with the discharge. So it shows that hydrology has a big influence, especially in terms of impact, in terms of export of this methane as well as these nutrient fluxes. And in recent times, some of the papers have hypothesized that Greenland and Antarctic ice sheet can be a potential source of methane. And if this methane is released to the atmosphere, that can cause a drastic warming. So, sorry, in short, if we see the system as a 2D, so glacier melt in the surface. This surface meltwater enters into a moulin, reaches the subglacial environment where subglacial hydrology takes place. Subglacial hydrology impacts the ice dynamics, which is on top. It impacts the biogeochemistry, also the erosion. I will not talk about this thing here now, but this is also something very important, especially the Himalayan or high mountain glaciers context. And then this biogeochemistry or eroded elements further goes back to the hydrology system, where through this hydrology system it is transported to the glacier outlet, and then it either mixes with the river or with the ocean, where it impacts the downstream ecosystem, and subsequently it can substantially impact the climate as well. So for this here, I would like to basically address two questions. One is like, how does subglacial hydrology affect ice dynamics? And secondly, how we investigate this interplay between subglacial hydrology and biogeochemistry. So how do I address them? So first, I work primarily on subglacial hydrology, to be precise, subglacial hydrology modeling. And then I use this hydrology information to investigate how they influence the ice dynamics and the biogeochemistry. So first, subglacial hydrology modeling. Now, subglacial system is pretty obscured. We do not have access to it. But although there are some proxy data available, for example, we can measure how much water is entering through the moulin or how the ice flow speed is changing. And from that, we have quite good understanding that how subglacial system evolves. And it evolves mainly through evolution of two different drainage systems. So one is the channelized drainage system. So as water enters through the moulin, then there is heat dissipation occurs. So basically kinetic energy is transferred to the thermal energy, and that leads to melting of ice. And that is how through melting of ice, this channel form, and they efficiently evacuate water from the subglacial system, and that is why they are known also as the fast or efficient drainage system. And then there also can be a slow system, which is basically water can be stored into bed depression, which is known as cavity, and this water can come due to the basal melt, due to the friction, due to the geothermal heat flux, and all these sources. So although they are small, but they are present therefore throughout the year. And when this water builds up in this cavity, they get connected to each other, and the water flows in very inefficient manner. But so these are basically these two main system that works underneath the glacier, and there is continuous exchange happens between the fast and the slow drainage system. And in the below you can see the 2D schematics of them. And here is a nice schematic showing where I will explain it bit more in detail. So here these polygons are basically the cavities where there are some water in the before the melt season. This is a moulin through which water enters into the system. So before melt, these cavities are connected to each other through these small links. But as we go toward the summer, the more and more water enters through this moulin, that leads to formation of channel and connects the cavity as well. And then as we go toward the late melt season, the water supply decreases and the channel collapse and system goes back to where it was. So now there are some subglacial hydrology model that basically tries to predict this scenario. And among them, glacier drainage system model, or GLADS, is known to be one of the most updated model of subglacial hydrology. And I use this for my study actually. So this is developed by Morrow Weather, with whom I closely work with. So, and this model basically simulates the evolution of this fast and the slow drainage system. This is a finite element model. So for that we need this kind of triangular grid, and in this grid, these edges, they act as channel. Each of these edges connect to two elements, and these elements act as cavity. And this node where these channels are connected, some of them may act as moulin. So if we have some moulin, we need to specify them in those node locations. So this is how the model is basically set up. Like any hydrology model, it mainly calculates the hydraulic potential, which is a sum of elevation potential and pressure potential. Now, the hydrology system underneath the glacier works in a bit different way. It's not an open channel. When this channel forms, these are formed due to the melting of ice. So in this channel, where there is bedrock below, but there are ice on top. Now, ice is a viscous material. So as this channel open, this ice on top tries to deform, and they try to close this channel system. So this is how basically the hydraulic potential is calculated, which is important to understand what will be the direction of the water flow. And then also the effective pressure is quite important in this context, is because, so what is effective pressure? Effective pressure is basically the difference between this ice pressure that is coming from top and the water pressure that is acting outward. And this difference is known as the effective pressure. Now you can imagine, if the water pressure is quite high and it is higher than the ice pressure, then that can basically lift the ice, and that is quite very important in terms of the dynamics of the glacier. And I will talk about it when I talk about the dynamics of glaciers. So what GLADS does, GLADS basically solves these two types of system and solves the mass, momentum, and energy conservation equation. So I'll not go very detailed, but briefly. So this is the mass conservation equation. This is for the cavity. This is for the channel. This H basically is the water thickness in the cavity. Q is the momentum, and M is the mass of the water. Here, this S denotes the area, the channel area. Now, channel is represented in 1D. The cavity is represented usually in 2D. For the momentum equation, we use Darcy's flow law. In this case, this alpha and this exponent, we can say beta, basically determines whether the flow there will be turbulent or laminar. And then there is time evolution, which is basically to certain extent the energy balance also. So the cavity opened due to movement of ice over a bedrock bump, and as ice slides over a bedrock, this melts here, and that leads to opening of this space in the other side, and that is how basically cavity open. The channel open mainly due to the heat dissipation. So this is the heat dissipation term, because as the water flows through the system, the mechanical energy converted to thermal energy, and that leads to opening of the channel. Both the cases, this cavity and the channel close due to the deformation of ice, because ice is a viscous material and it deforms over time, and that leads to closure of these two systems. And so this is the basically main basic equations that GLAD solves. And then these two are connected by applying water mass conservation in channel. So this is the channel which is connected to two cavities, and mass conservation is applied in this channel, and also mass conservation is applied in these nodes where these channels are connected. And this is how these two systems are basically connected to each other. If you want to know more, you can look at the paper by Morrow Weder in JJR 2013, I think. So I use this model for the Leverett Glacier catchment in the southwest Greenland. So this is Leverett Glacier. I show the mesh. This is where it is located in Greenland. And first we need an optimum mesh, and then we need a DEM, digital elevation model, for the bed and also for the surface. This is taken from the bed machine data. And also we need surface melt data and also the basal melt data. These are widely available. And once we have that, then we can basically run GLADs. And here I show a simulation. So here I show a simulation for 1 year. So here the bottom panel shows how the water enters into the system. So this is the beginning of summer, the water starts to enter, reaches a peak, and then as we go toward the winter, the water flow decreases. In top panel, these red dots are the molan through which water enters into the system. This small arrow, if you can see, this denotes the cavity, and this blue line will show the channel. This contours represents the hydraulic potential. So if you look how it evolves, so as the water enters into the system, this channel starts to form. They reach inland and they connect the interior of the glacier. And then as we go toward the winter, the water flow decreases, the channel closes, and then system goes back to where it was. So this is how basically the system works. And by showing this, I want to say that the GLADs pretty well, quite well simulates this drainage structure evolution. Here is a snapshot of the drainage structure, how it looks like during a peak melt. What it shows that this channel usually start from the molan, but some of the channel may start to form but may not reach the main channel because of the topography and also the water supply. So these are the main two things that determines where and how the channel will form: the topography and the water supply. So these channels are basically a low pressure system. So when this channel form, they attract water from the surrounding, and that's how it evacuates water from the subglacial system. But then when the water supply decreases, the channel close and the water pressure again increases. And that's why if you look at some of the glacier front, you will see these channels remain open. And the reason is that because in the lower part, the ice thickness is low. So the closure rate is low, and that's why some of this channel remain open throughout the year. But as we go more inward, you will see these things closes, and as we go toward the upper elevation, this channel completely closes. Now here are some of the results from the GLAD simulation, and the top panel is for effective pressure. And I show it for the 5 different days, during the beginning of the summer, 2 during the peak summer, and toward the end of the summer. So at the beginning and at the end, you see there is not much variation in the effective pressure because there is not much water in the system. But as we go look at the summer time, the water enters into the system. The water pressure initially increases because in the absence of channel, and then also as the channel form, the water pressure further increases, and the effective pressure water pressure decreases and the effective pressure increases. And that's why you see there is quite a lot of variation in the effective pressure in the during when the water enters into the system. If we look at the hydraulic potential, this is very important to understand how the water will move underneath the system. Again, the hydraulic potential is basically same at the beginning, at the end, but during summer when there are water, the hydraulic potential changes. Now this is not very important for a single glacier, but if we do the simulation for a larger area of Greenland, you will see there are many glaciers that are adjacent to each other. And when this water enters into the system, it is very important to understand how this subglacial catchment look like. So I use this hydraulic potential calculation to calculate how the subglacial drainage delineation changes for different glaciers in Greenland. So what basically GLAD does, GLAD basically derives seasonal evolution of channel and cavities. It can give pretty robust estimate of water flow direction, and it can also solves different small scale processes such as channel and the cavity evolution. So now what I do, I basically use this subglacial hydrology information and try to investigate how this hydrology affects the ice dynamics. Now, ice moves mainly due to two reasons. One is due to its own deformation, because ice is a viscous material. It deforms over time. That leads to movement of ice, which is this one. But also there can be presence of water in the bed, and that leads to facilitate sliding of ice over the bedrock. And that is one of the big component or major component of movement of ice. But also there can be bed which can be soft in nature. That means it can be composed of till or sediment, and this sediment also can deform over time. That can lead to also movement of ice on top. So this is basically how the glacier moves or the ice dynamics works, and this is very much dependent on the hydrology and as well as also on the bed properties. And if we plot, if we see the comparison between ice flow and discharge, so here is a real ice flow data, ice velocity data from this location. And this blue curve is basically the idealized runoff, which usually starts in the May, takes a peak in July and ends in the September. You see the ice flow speeds up usually in the first half of the melt season, and that can be quite easily explained with the hydrology simulation. What happens here is basically that as the water starts to enter into the system, there is no channel formed, so water pressure increases. And as the water pressure increases, the effective pressure decreases. And we can write the sliding velocity and the effective pressure relation in this way, which means if the effective pressure decreases, that leads to increase of the ice sliding. And that is what basically happens here. But as we go toward the peak melt season, their channel starts to form. And as channel form, water pressure decreases, and that leads to increase in the effective pressure, and that leads to decrease of the ice velocity. And that is what, and this is what you will see mostly across the glacier all over the, mostly in the Greenland and also in the mountain glaciers. And this pattern is quite well known as the spring event. So in this case, what we understand is that effective pressure is very crucial in terms of the sliding. So if we want to know how the system evolves, how glacier dynamics is going to change, understanding the effective pressure evolution is very crucial. If we look at the ice speed pattern in Greenland, so here the warmer color shows the high ice flow and the colder color is the low ice speed. And if we compare that with the bed properties of Greenland, so here blue color shows the weak bed and the red shows the strong bed. You see that there is no clear correlation between high ice flow and the soft and the hard bed. There is a mixed signal. Now, if we look at the soft bed can be basically sediment or porous type in nature, which can have a high storage capacity. So if our bed is soft or sediment in nature, that means that there can be infiltration or exfiltration of water from this bed and to the interface between bed and the ice, right? So that led me to think like how this system, how this storage capacity affects the effective pressure and subsequently the ice dynamics. So if you look at the fundamental equation in GLADS, you see this term. This takes into account the storage in these cavities, and this is very much dependent on the water pressure, and we can write it as a function of N-glacial void ratio. What is N-glacial void ratio? Is basically it tells about the porosity or the void space in the water, in the bed, basically. Sorry. So what I do, I change this EV and want to see how the effective pressure evolves for same glacier system. And here I show a simulation. So this is again the bottom panel. Here I do it with a real forcing. There is the water input, and in this force subplot I change the EV from 0. So this basically represents the hard bed scenario, and then gradually I increase EV in one order in all this for figure 2, 3, and 4. And then I see how the effective pressure evolves. And here I want your attention for the negative side, because negative effective pressure means the water pressure is basically high. And when water pressure is high or effective pressure is low, that is when it is going to affect the ice most in terms of dynamics. And here you see as the water enters into the system, the top two panel attains the negative effective pressure value very quickly. But in the bottom two panel, this negative effective pressure is attained over a long time, and it is more sustained there. And also you can, if you look carefully, you see as the water pulses increases in this system, the effective pressure in this case immediately drops. Which what it basically says that first, based on if we have a different storage ratio, if we have different storage in the bed, that affects the effective pressure in different way. And secondly, it says that in case of a hard bed scenario or low storage scenario, in case of an extreme event or sudden impulse of water, the effective pressure can drastically fall. Whereas if we have a storage, high storage, that can lead to a sustained period of negative effective pressure value. Now, if we look at the same thing for and compare it with the Greenland ice stream in the northeast part and in this region, you see this region has a very inland high flow. And if you see the bed pattern in this case, this is very much a soft bed. And this region actually experiences a sustained period of high ice flow velocity. In recent time, there have been some study done or some direct measurements has been done through seismic, where it is observed like around 1 kilometer thick of sedimentary basin beneath the fast flowing Antarctic ice stream. So what it tells basically that it's to certain extent supports that this bed storage can impact the ice dynamics substantially. So this is one of the thing I try. I also test different other parameters and its influence on its sensitivity on the effective pressure, because that is what ultimately influence the ice dynamics. And here I show it only for the storage because that is where I found the most the effective pressure being most sensitive. Now, why I do all this? And this is very important to understand is that, so whatever I have shown is basically a qualitative analysis. I test different influence of different variable on the effective pressure evolution. Now, if you look at the ice sheet models, they are used to project sea level rise at the century scale, and then they are run usually either in 1 year or in the 6 months time period. But subglacial hydrology is expected to have a short-term effect on ice dynamics. It can be seasonal to intraday. So when these ice sheet models are used to project future sea level rise, often these short-term variability in ice dynamics are ignored. And that is one of the reason of uncertainty in the sea level projection. So with this analysis, what I try to do, I basically try to assess the important parameter that have crucial control on the ice dynamics. And then I plan to propose that to be used for the ice sheet model so that we can better represent the ice dynamics, and subsequently we can better predict probably the sea level rise. So yeah, so whatever I have shown so far is basically the qualitative analysis, and in the next part, what I in the next part means in future, what I want to do is basically I want to quantify that the impact of subglacial hydrology and different other system on the ice dynamics. And on that note, and also to investigate the hydrology influence on erosion and sediment transport. Combining all this, I recently submitted a proposal in FNRS Belgium. This is for the Greenland, but for erosion and sediment transport, this is very crucial for high mountain Asia or the Himalayan glaciers actually. So this is how basically I investigate the hydrology influence on the ice dynamics. Next is how I investigate the hydrology influence on the biogeochemistry. So well, I don't know how much time do I left. Can I get some estimate?
Yes, Dr. Ankit, you can take around 5-10 minutes more.
Okay, I'll then try to wrap up quickly here. So the subglacial hydrology influence on the biogeochemistry is quite well known, but so far no attempt had been taken to understand it through a process-based model. So here at ULB, we took the very first approach to develop a coupled model of subglacial hydrology and biogeochemistry. I'm not a biogeochemist, so what I do, I mostly work on the hydrology and the coupling part, and then I collaborate with different people to investigate, to develop, to understand this process basically. So what I will do here, I will briefly give the overview or the major process major understanding behind the development of this model. So what happens that through this Mulan, as I mentioned, this along with water, tracers enter into the system, and this tracer, if this tracer is oxygen, that can impact the microbial activity and the methane production and methane degradation as well. Okay, and here I will primarily focus on the oxygen as a tracer. And in this figure, I will explain in brief what is the idea behind this model. So this is a channel structure, a simplified channel structure. This is the outlet, this is the moolan, and different color represents the different channel. And this inverted triangles, these are the cavity. So each channel segment is connected with two cavity. So this is the moolan through which the tracers enter into the system. They get transported through the channel, and on the way it interacts with the cavity. So that is how these tracers get distributed in the cavity. Now each of these cavities is connected to a reaction module where all the biogeochemical reactions takes place. So what happens here, that as the tracers get transported through this channel and reaches these cavities where it influences the reaction, and then further these weathered elements or reacted elements, they get back to the channel due to this interaction, and then further get transported through this channel toward the outlet. And in the outlet, then further we can measure and we can validate with the observational data. So this is basically how the main concept behind the model. So how do we do that? Basically, we couple the subglacial hydrology model with a reaction transport model, which is basically this equation. Here C is the concentration. This part takes into account the dispersion and the friction or the transport. The second term takes into account the interaction between channel and cavity. And this last part is basically the reaction which is basically this box where all these biogeochemical interactions takes place. We can change this moolan concentration. Also, we can change the initial cavity concentration. We can change them spatially and temporally and see how different concentration and evolution of concentration affects different biogeochemical elements, biogeochemical reactions. So here, in brief, I will explain these in terms of hydrology perspective from the result from three locations. One is in the lower part of the glacier, one is in the mid part of the glacier, and one is in the upper part of the glacier. So if we look at the channel evolution, so this is the time, I will show the time evolution of this scenario. So this is the channel area. If we look at the channel area in the lower part, so here solid color is channel discharge, dash color is channel area, basically. In the lower part, the channel area is very high because there are more water that leads to formation of bigger channel. But as we go toward the upper part, the channel area is pretty low, and also they start to form in the late part in the melt season. If we look at the cavity, so each channel is connected with two cavities. That is why these two lines basically. If we look at the upper part, the cavity volume is quite high because the channel are not very efficient there. So as the water enters into the system, it gets spread into the cavity. And that is how these tracers get transported through the hydrology system to the interior of the ice sheet. And then it basically influences the chemical reaction and also the production of methane or carbon dioxide. In the mid part, initially the channel didn't form, that's why the cavity volume increases, but then immediately as the channel forms, then cavity volume decreases, and for the lower part, as the channel is quite efficient there is not much interaction is happening between the channel and the cavity. From GLADS, we can also calculate the discharge between channel and cavity. So in this figure, y-axis is discharge. The positive means discharge is going from cavity to channel. The negative is discharge is going from channel to cavity. What you see is that there can be a vigorous exchange between the channel and cavity. And what it does basically, it basically leads to export of this. It basically leads to export of this tracer to the cavity, but also through this interaction, this weathered element can get back to the channel and they can get transported. What it shows is that this dynamics can be very vibrant, very spatially varying, and this is very much dependent on the hydrology evolution, which is further dependent on water input and also on the topography. And I would like to show this figure, which is very important in terms of climate change perspective. So here I show the number of days these cavities remain connected to the channel. Now in this upper part, as channel is not very efficient, their cavities remain connected maximum number of days in a year, but there is a large area which remain isolated, and this area remained isolated probably tens and hundreds and thousands of years. But if you look at the Greenland ice sheet melt, this surface melt is approaching more toward the inland, and as the surface melt goes upward, there will be more moraine formation, and that will connect this isolated area, which remain isolated for over a long time, and whatever reaction, whatever weathered elements, whatever biogeochemical elements are there, that can get transported through this hydrology system to the glacier outlet, where it can be added to the ocean, and it will influence the downstream ecosystem and and ultimately that can impact the climate as well. So through this model development, we are basically trying to assess the present scenario, but as well as how things are going to change in future warming climate as well. So for the biogeochemical application, I collaborate with different people. So for Veronica, who is a PhD student at ULB, whom I'm co-supervising, she is using different reaction rate to understand how whether the bed is oxic or anoxic. And then we are collaborating with some of the field, some of the researchers from Charles University, where they do laboratory experiment, incubation experiment for the methane. And recently we are in the process of applying our model for the Svalbard glacier, where there are a lot of biogeochemical data available. So in short, in summary, what I do basically, I showed that hydrology plays very important role in terms of ice dynamics and the biogeochemistry. And what I do, I use hydrology model to investigate the critical processes that influence the ice dynamics, because this is important to understand to better predict the sea level rise. And what I found is that bed storage can play a big role in terms of ice dynamics, but there are also other factors that can have some substantial influence on the ice dynamics as well. For the coupled hydrology biogeochemistry model, we took the very first approach to develop this model, because this is very important if we want to understand how different biogeochemical elements will be transported from the glacier system to the fjord or to the ocean. And we do it mainly for the methane, and also for the nutrients, and we finally try to assess its impact on the ecosystem and also on the climate. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Ankit, for that interesting talk. We can now take questions. Yeah, so we already have a question from our PhD student, Debasmita. I'll read out the question. So she asks, is there any lasting effect of glacial lake outburst floods on subglacial drainage network? For example, Lake Hewlett is the largest dammed lake situated in South Greenland. Lake Hewlett drains roughly annually through Lake Hewlett's hydrologic network in a glacial lake outburst flood. When water level rises such that it can flow over the obstructive ridge. So this is a question.
Okay. Yeah. So you are talking about the ice dam lake on the impact of ice dam lake on the subglacial drainage network. So ice dam lakes are basically formed. It's basically proglacial lake that are formed in the where the glacier retreats basically. So it can have some because what it can do, it can impact the hydrostatic pressure, and that can to certain extent for sure impact the water flow. But I wouldn't say there will be a big effect of that. Yeah, if there is lake outburst happens, that can of course change the hydrostatic pressure, and that can impact the lake drainage, subglacial hydrology as well. But otherwise, apart from that, I can't see there is any big impact on this from the hydrology side.
Okay. Devasmita, is this does this help with your like question?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, if you have any specific, please do ask. I'm not sure whether I addressed your question rightly.
Yeah. Hi. So yeah, I have got my answers, and thank you for your answer.
Okay. So next we have Navinya. Navinya, if you like to ask the question, you can like switch on the video and ask the question.
Yeah. Hello, Ankit. Am I audible?
Yes.
Hello?
Yeah, you are. I can hear you.
Yeah, my question was like the topic was really interesting, and we came to know more about subglacial hydrology. So the GLADS model, what you were explaining, would it be implemented in high mountain Asia glaciers if the moulins locations are known?
Yeah, it can be. It has been used in the Alps, in the Swiss Alps, glaciers in Swiss Alps actually, because that is where the model was developed actually. So yeah, if you have topographic information, if you know the Moulin information and also the water inflow, then yes, it can be used, and yeah, it can be used. But the thing is, in Himalaya and in high mountain Asia, this because of the steep topography, this channel structure will be very confined actually. Unlike in Greenland, this evolves, this can change actually. That's my understanding. But yeah, definitely it can be used with the if you have this bed information data, surface elevation data, and if you can provide Moulin locations, then yeah.
Suppose if moulins are not there, then it will be difficult to study the subglacial hydrology of a specific glacier.
Uh, well, so first of all, subglacial hydrology by default is bit difficult because it's because we do not have access to this environment. We use some proxy data, some radar data, but still, I think there is a lot to do. There are a lot of unconstrained parameters are there. But if we talk in terms of modeling perspective, even without a Mulan, it can be done. Like for example, in Antarctica, if you have the basal meltwater information, for example, in Antarctica, basal meltwater is the main source of meltwater in the base. So that estimate is there. If that estimate is there, yeah, then we can see where this channel or whether this channel will form or water will flow mostly in an inefficient manner. It can be tested. It can be checked. Yeah. So Mulan is not a necessary condition, but if you have some other water source, it can be done. If you know the basal meltwater information, then yeah, and it has been used in Antarctica as well. Yeah.
Why? Because most of the glaciers have crevasses, even at the equilibrium line area or at the ablation area, crevasses are there instead of moulins. So I just thought, would it be like relevant to get into those aspects while you are implementing the GLADS in these Himalayan glaciers?
Yeah, so it depends on the scale, I would say. Well, crevasse, if this crevasse ultimately leads to formation of Mulan, that matters. But these crevasses, I believe, they do not touch the bed, right? They are not going at the bed as completely. So there will be changes in ice thickness, but that is very small scale thing. I think that further can be considered, but otherwise it will not have that much impact if we consider it as a glacier-wide phenomena.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Ankit. Thank you for your information.
Yeah, so we have one more question from Sharantan. He's asking, how is the subglacial dynamics validated?
That's a good question. So subglacial dynamics, or you mean? I think you mean subglacial dynamics means subglacial hydrology probably. I'm not sure, but yeah, I'll consider it as subglacial hydrology. A change basically validated. So it's a bit difficult, but nowadays there are few sophisticated measurements techniques are there. For example, there is a new device named cryoeg which can be dropped through the Mulan that measure the pressure. That is one way. Radar data can be used it is used in Antarctica. So radar's peculiarity content is basically, so if the surface is rough or if surface is smooth, then radar signal will be reflected in different way, which is known basically as peculiarity content in short. So and from analyzing this peculiarity content data, one can understand or one can try to assess whether it is a flat body, and flat body means it can be inefficient system like cavity, and if it is channel, it is more like a rough, so the radar reflection will be different. So this has been used to certain extent to constrain this process in Antarctica. Also seismics can be used, seismic data can be used. And another thing is the tracer experiments actually, which has been done for the leverage actually. So these are the way it can be done. In our case, we do stressors, but there are nowadays there are new sophisticated techniques are coming which are basically used to get more information to constrain these subglacial hydrological processes.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ankit. So we can take one more question if anyone else have any question. Yeah, so we don't see any question anymore. So we'll close the session now.